Hi, I'm Dr. Vermeulen, and this is part of the Stellenbosch University CP Well program. And our theme, the topic for today is understanding your amazing neurological design. Now, why would it be necessary to speak about a topic like this? And it is essential to understand that if we look at the slide of Millennium of the Mind and Century of the Brain, places like Harvard will tell us that the only way that we will have a competitive advantage is if we can outthink, outlearn, and outcreate our competition. So this is going to be a rule that is going to be vital for businesses as well as individuals to understand that if we really want to be cutting-edge 21st century people, we need to use the mental faculties of our brain to think, to learn, and to be very creative. This means that brain power is going to be your number one determiner for success. But what is very important that we have to have an understanding of is we all learn, but we learn in different ways. We all think, but we think in different ways, and we can all be creative, but in different ways. So the question is, you need to have an accurate understanding of how you prefer to learn and think and be creative, because that is the value that you have to add to this world, and that is what you also bring to the workplace. That's how you make a difference and how you impact this world. So it's essential that we need to have accurate understanding about these mental faculties. But if we look at the brain, our brain is extremely powerful, and it is able to do whatever we wanted to do in terms of learning, thinking, and being creative. But there are some optimizers that influence how we think, how we learn, and how we are creative. And these optimizers can speed up our brain performance, or it may sometimes hinder or slow down brain performance. And that is why it's so important that we need to have accurate awareness also about how these factors influence our thinking and our learning abilities. Now, when we look at this next slide, we've identified six primary factors that influences your brain's performance. And those factors are brain fitness, it is how well you cope with stress, it's a positive attitude, appropriate mental skills, a humanized physical environment, and also brain food. Now, if we talk about brain fitness per se, what does that mean? Brain fitness means we've got one brain, but it's got two brain hemispheres. Just as you are looking at my hands, my two fists suggest one hemisphere, but one brain. But this brain consists of two brain hemispheres. And the left side of my brain controls the right side of the body, and the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body. So just like our world works is how our brain works. We live in one world, but it's got a northern hemisphere and a southern hemisphere. And that's how we need to look at understanding how our brain works. Now, if we want to be cutting-edge people who can deal with volumes of information in the 21st century, it means that we need to utilize both brain hemispheres simultaneously in order to read, to spell, to write, and so forth. But this does not mean that we just necessarily automatically do this. If we do not learn to do this, it doesn't mean that we will be brain fit. Now let me illustrate to you. As you are looking at me, I just want you to quickly do the following with me. Just clap your hands, cross over, touch your nose and your ear, and then switch over to the other side. So just imitate this and do this with me, please. Now, as you are doing this, what you will notice is you need to think to be able to do an activity like this. And that is what brain fitness is all about. Our brain is part of the body, and just like we have to exercise the body in order to become fit and really do well in a race, so the 21st century learner and thinker needs to become brain fit in order to become cutting-edge 21st century people who can process large volumes of information and still make sense out of all this data. And this is an ability that we have to develop. It's not something that you just spontaneously learn how to do. You need to develop the skill. So the good news, we want to really do well, we need to be brain fit. That's the first optimizer for brain performance. The next optimizer for brain performance is coping with stress. Now, stress means to lose control. Lose control of what? I lose control over the non-dominant side of my brain. In other words, we are whole brain people. But when we use our brain, we have to understand, as you are looking, maybe to visually illustrate this, as you are looking at me, now extend your hands like this, make a hole with your hands, not bigger than a golf ball, and then look through this hole in your hands at the screen, just as I am illustrating to you now. Now, as you are doing that, you will only see one eye, and that is the point that I want to make. When I look at you with both eyes. But if I do this exercise, you will only see one eye, and this means that is the eye that leads. And therefore, even though we have two brain hemispheres, we have to understand one brain hemisphere leads and one follows, even if both are functioning 100% simultaneously. If people are, as you are listening to me and I start talking softer, you may turn your ear towards me in this manner. And so we've got two ears, but when you listen, sometimes one ear will lead, the other one will follow. And that is how this works in problem solving and in thinking and in learning as well. So we have to understand that one hemisphere leads, one follows. Now, why is that important? Because stress means to lose control. Lose control of what? To lose control over the non-dominant side of your brain. So this means if I'm left hemisphere dominant, during stress, I may lose control first over the non-dominant right brain hemisphere in my case, because I am a left hemisphere dominant person. So what this means is I may even be a brain fit person, but if I experience too much stress, I may shut down access to some parts of my brain, and that's going to limit my performance as well. So learning to cope with stress so that we can maintain access to all areas of the brain in the 21st century is going to be a vital prerequisite if we really want to perform very well. The third optimizer for brain performance is attitude. It's the wiring on the inside here in the gray, white and gray matters of our brain. Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you can't, you are right. And this is what we have to understand. We are the sum total of our thinking. And our behavior is a reflection of our thinking. So if we don't act like skilled and smart people, it's because we don't have proper skills and we may be not thinking in smart ways. But the good news is we are all smart, but just in different ways. And it's vital for you to understand, how are you smart? Now, positive attitude is the key to success. A positive mind produces a positive life, and a negative mind produces a negative life. A positive mind can never produce a negative life, and vice versa. So if we really want to become those giants that we were destined to be, our thinking needs to help us get there. In other words, possibility thinking, positive thinking, constructive thinking that will help us to become the people that we could be is going to be a necessity for you and me in order to really grow and be effective and impact the world in a positive way. The fourth driver that influences performance is appropriate skill. And what I'm saying here is it's the millennium of the mind and the century of the brain. And information is exploding. At the moment, learners have to process about 20 times more volumes of information than I had to 35 years ago. But the day still just stays 24 hours long. But the volume of information that I now have to handle has increased 20-fold. So it is vital that we should have appropriate learning skills, reading skills, thinking skills, problem-solving skills, memory skills, concentration skills. Without these skills, we are not going to be that effective and successful. But then the fifth factor that influences our performance is the physical environment in which we learn and think. As you are looking at the screen, you will see that the screen is dominated by blue. Why? Because when people see blue, your brain produces 11 different neurotransmitters that speeds up electrical transmission between cells and even strengthen your immune system. But for instance, the colors white, gray, and black are the least preferred colors for the brain. So what is it that I see, hear, smell, taste, and touch? And how does that influence my brain's performance? And here the key is, the more humanized your environment is, the more effective you are, and because you produce more neurotransmitters. But the more dehumanized your environment is, the more negatively it will impact your learning performance. And then the sixth factor to take in mind that also significantly influences your brain performance is brain food. Your brain produces 20 to 25 watts of electricity, and this electricity comes from a combination of the water you drink, the oxygen you breathe, and the food that you eat. And here the rule is, nature's produce is in and man's quick fixes are out. So we should not go for the quick fix route, but we should go for the healthy lifestyle of salads and fruits and vegetables and more white meat proteins and so forth. So these 6 drivers have a major impact on your performance regardless of what your intelligence quotient is. And therefore, if we don't focus on these things, then we may not always understand why we are not acting according to our potential. But now it gets a little bit more interesting than this. Peter Drucker, who is considered to be the father of leadership, has said that knowing your strengths and how you learn and think and acting on this knowledge is the key to performance. So accurate self-awareness with regards to your neurological learning style today, in today's world, in the 21st century, is not negotiable anymore. It is mandatory. Now, when we look at the following slide, Neurolink has I have designed a tool to assess the mental faculties that influence how we think, how we learn, and how we process information. And we are going to quickly just look at the bigger picture with regards to all the faculties that influences how we learn, think, and create, because these faculties will impact eventually how successful we are. Now, Neurolink are workplace learning specialists. We specialize in the neuroscience of learning, and therefore we've designed a tool that looks at the different drivers that influences brain performance, but also the different preferences that learners have when they think, when they learn, and when they are creative, because eventually this will influence how you prefer to learn, how you prefer to think, and so forth. The world at the moment is focusing a lot on strengths-based development. So strengths start by accurately understanding your natural preferences. And that's the purpose of this tool, is to just have a look at what are your unique preferences. Now, what we have to understand, therefore, is we all learn, but we learn in different ways. But my brain fitness, as previously discussed, will have a significant impact on my performance in the learning situation. And when you look at this slide there, you will see that homolateral means I use my brain in alternate fashion, the one or the other. Now, when I use my brain in alternate fashion, the one or the other, it means I have 2 hemispheres, but I use one at a given time, and that's going to slow me down. It is going to take me longer, learning is going to be longer and harder for me. But the more I move up on the line towards the right, becoming an integrated person who functions in a bilateral way. In other words, I'm utilizing both brain hemispheres simultaneously. That will make learning easier for me, and it will help me work faster and smarter. So that's the first optimizer we have to take into consideration. But when we look at the next slide, it is essential for us to understand that we've got one brain but two hemispheres. And I referred to it earlier that your brain works like our planet. We've got a northern and a southern hemisphere, but we do know that when it's winter in the southern hemisphere, it is summer in the northern hemisphere. So in terms of thinking and learning, our brain hemispheres have complementary functions, but they are not the same. So my brain roughly works like a movie. So I have a soundtrack part, a language part, and I have the visuals, the picture part. But together, it gives me one holistic picture. But even if I'm a whole brain person and I use both, one will lead and one will follow. And that will influence my thinking and my learning preferences and how well I perform and what my preferences will be. It will even influence my leadership style and the kind of person I will be in general. But now when we look at the next slide with regards to stress, we have to remember accurately understanding your leading hemisphere is vital, because under stress, even if we're whole brain people, but under stress, if we shut down, we will lose control over the non-dominant hemisphere of the brain. And that in itself is again going to cause us to work longer and harder and to be slower. But the better we cope, the easier it is for us to utilize both brain hemispheres simultaneously. So coping with stress is a necessity for the 21st century person. When we look at the next slide, you will see that we also have a preference to use our brain from the front to the back. Your front brain-oriented learner is a person who's very expressive. So they learn by talking, debating, arguing, discussing. So when they learn, they make noises. You hear them learn. You hear them think. But your receptive learner is the absorbent, the reserved type of person. They often appear to be quiet and shy. So they're quiet when they learn and often enjoy rather being functioning individually and being alone when they study. Then when we look at the next slide, if we do not take stress and brain fitness into consideration, we can divide, and we look at the brain from the top, we can divide the brain in 4 quadrants. And your left quadrant is typically the figurative language of the scientist. In other words, our brain speaks different figurative languages, but the left frontal lobe is the preference of people who are very analytical, very scientifically oriented. They speak a right and wrong language. It's often the preference of scientists and engineers. When we look at the next one, the people who use the left backside of the brain are very results-oriented and action-oriented people, and they want to get things done. But your right at the back quadrant are the people who are very human, people-oriented. They are very relationships-oriented. They like people. They like interacting with people. They learn through experiences. They like learning with other people. And then the last quadrant is the one right in the front, and that is your strategist. They are the people who conceptualize and who think ahead and who are creative and enjoy innovative thinking. So we need to have an understanding that all people, even if we speak the same language, literally, the figurative language that we speak may still be very different, and that may still cause us to miscommunicate. In my case, I speak a results language. In my wife's case, she speaks a relationships language. So sometimes we may, if we want to solve a problem or resolve conflict, our point of departure and how we will resolve that conflict will be completely different. But then we also get people who utilize the top part of the brain more than the bottom part of the brain. That means they are very academic, they are very rational, reason governs their thinking, so they are academic learners. But if I focus on the deeper areas of the brain, as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, there you will see they focus more on feelings and experiences, and they are often also called feelers or experiential learners. So some people want the facts and others learn through experiences. But remember, in order to be effective whole brain people, we need to be both all the time. But then when we look at the next slide, it's very important. You've learned that the two brain hemispheres have different processing functions. But when we look at the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body, in other words, the left hemisphere with its unique functions controls the right eye, the right ear, and the right hand. So that means that my processing preferences of those senses will be very specific and very different from the right brain hemisphere that controls the left side of the left eye, the left ear, and the left hand. So this makes us very unique. We need to have accurate understanding of our dominant brain, eye, ear, and hand dominance, and also understand how will that influence our performance. For an example, if we look at this slide, we'll see that the heading says full sensory access. If a person is, for instance, left hemisphere dominant, but right-handed, right-eyed, and right-eared, even when that person shuts down and they experience stress, they will have access through the eye, ear, and hand that is opposite the dominant brain hemisphere, which means they will be visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learners. But when we look at the next slide, we will see the slide called block dominance. What you will see is now when the dominant senses are all on the same side as the dominant brain hemisphere during stress, all the information through those senses goes to a switched off hemisphere, which causes a neurological hindrance for learners and thinkers during stress. So obviously, this may cause people to look but not see, to hear but not listen. And that will often have a debilitating impact on people in the learning situation. Then what comes into the equation is also, what is the value that I place on the different senses when I learn? For instance, in my case, I am 50% visual, 40% kinesthetic, and only 10% auditory. So visual means I first need to see. Whatever I learn, I want to see it. 40% kinesthetic says I have a high preference for doing things and action-oriented learning. But the 10% preference for me says that I don't process a lot of information by listening. So how I seal the deal when learning is I've got to see it, then do it, and lastly, I will then listen to some details still. But we need to take into consideration all these aspects. And the last aspect we have to take into consideration also are our intelligence preferences. The question today is not to ask, am I smart or am I dumb? But rather ask, how am I smart? What is my intelligence preference? And if you look at that screen, there's just an example of 11 different ways of how people are smart. And it is essential for you to understand what are your natural preferences, because if you develop appropriate, when you align your skills with your preference, you become good in that area. In other words, when we look at the slide, look at those that has that little asterisk on the right-hand side. That is, for instance, in this case, the person who is physical, kinesthetic, and sensory, those will be natural preferences. So not competence, but preference. But now, when we choose subjects that are aligned with how we are smart, and then when we choose careers that are aligned with how we are smart, we become passionate about being who we are, because it's aligned with my natural preferences and strengths. And therefore, it's essential that we have to understand how we are smart. We have to remember that, for instance, Nelson Mandela was a people-smart person. Einstein was a science-smart person. Mozart is a music-smart person. Richard Branson is a creative or entrepreneurial smart person. So we are all smart, but in different ways. But in order for you to impact this world significantly, have accurate understanding of your way of being smart, and then develop appropriate skills, then choose appropriate subjects and make appropriate career choices, and you will impact the world significantly with this understanding. So accurate understanding of your amazing neurological design is not a nice to have, but a vital necessity in the 21st century to truly make a significant impact in the world. So make yourself a priority and discover the truth about your amazing neurological design. Thank you for watching with me this program. I trust you enjoyed it.